Welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast with your host, Alvin Bonds II. Join us each week as Alvin explores the relationship between leadership and families by interviewing leaders in different fields all over the world. Alvin believes that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families.
Hello, and welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast. I am your host, Alvin Bonds II, and this is episode 24. Today, I interview Akshay Nanavati. Before I get to that interview, I'd like to talk just a moment about fear. As you listen to today's interview, I invite you to reflect on the relationship with fear in your life. Akshay has written a book called Fearvana, and he talks to us about the relationship of fear and simply embracing fear in our lives. Akshay is a United States Marine Corps veteran, speaker, adventurer, and entrepreneur. After overcoming a lifestyle of drug addiction that killed two of his friends in high school, Akshay enlisted in the Marines, despite two doctors telling him boot camp would kill him because of a blood disorder he was born with. He not only survived, but graduated infantry school as the honor graduate in his platoon. In 2007, Akshay was deployed to Iraq, where one of his jobs was to walk in front of vehicle convoys to find improvised explosive devices before they could be used to kill him and his fellow Marines. After returning from the war, Akshay was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and he also struggled with alcohol addiction that pushed him to the brink of suicide. Akshay and his work have been featured in places like CNN, Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Forbes, Runner's World, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, Huffington Post, and so much more. In Akshay's book, Fearvana, he teaches the science of how to transform all of your seemingly negative emotions into health, wealth, and happiness. Akshay has received numerous reviews of his book, including a review from the Dalai Lama. Akshay's book Fearvana has reached over 35 countries and has become an eternal extension of his passion and mission. Before we get to my interview with Akshay, I'd like to play an audio of one of his YouTube videos. What is Fearvana?
I stand for something that might be a little counterintuitive, possibly even outrageous. See, most experts tell you to get rid of fear, but I believe fear is the path to enlightenment. My name is Akshay Nanavati. I'm a former United States Marine, and I've written the book Fearvana. My life today is absolutely incredible. I've been married 4.5 years to a beautiful woman. To this day, we just live like we've been married for the first month. I have a very successful business coaching people, helping them embrace adversity and really living a full life. I work with entrepreneurs, people who have corporate jobs and some of them want to quit. I've worked with veterans. I get to travel the world. I work from where I want, when I want, and my life couldn't be better. I gotta tell you though, it wasn't always like this for me. I spent 7 months fighting the war in Iraq, but I realized that the greatest battles I ever had to fight was the ones when I came back home. War actually grants us the gifts of courage. It allows us to practice courage on a daily basis. At home, I didn't have that. So when I came home, I struggled with alcohol. I found myself binge drinking to the point that eventually I actually found myself on the point of suicide. So I knew at that point, at that moment, something needed to change. So I started reading. I started reading books on neuroscience, books on psychology. That's how I learned how to heal my brain and rewire the patterns that had gotten me to that very, very low point in my life. The learning to embrace fear, actually seeking it out, was my salvation. I found my salvation through suffering, through seeking out fear, through seeking out ways to grow. I've climbed mountains all over the world. I've skied 350 miles across the second largest ice cap in the world. So I get that you might think I'm some sort of masochistic nut. You know, if you're scared of snakes, you don't have to run into a cage filled with boas. It doesn't matter. You don't have to face your fears in that way. You just have to find some struggle that's worthy of you, something that's going to push you a little bit outside your comfort zone so you can ultimately grow from it. Whether it be writing a book, quitting your job to start your own business, running a marathon. Everybody's got their own struggle and they have to choose it, because if you don't choose your struggle, struggle will find you anyway. I know what it's like to be afraid. I've almost been killed by boulders in the Himalayas. I've been trapped in little caves around the world. I've spent a month in the harshest environment in minus 40 degrees across an ice cap, and I know it can be terrifying. And I want you to know one thing. Don't run from that fear. Use it. It is your greatest gift.
Well, Akshay, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Would you mind taking a moment and telling us about you?
Sure. So a little bit about my background and kind of what led me to the work that I'm doing today. It kind of started in my journey in high school when for about a year and a half I was on drugs pretty heavily, and I lost 2 friends to drug addiction, and I was very much headed down that path myself. But thankfully I got out. I joined the Marines, despite 2 doctors telling me that Marine Corps boot camp would kill me because of a blood disorder I have. But obviously I survived, and I started learning in the Marines the value of pushing my limitations and engaging my fears to achieve something worthwhile. And through that, I started mountain climbing, skydiving, cave diving, rock climbing. I mean, you name it. Nature became my playground. And then in 2007, I was deployed to Iraq, had amazing life experience, but obviously with some challenges. Came back, was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and then struggled with alcoholism until it pushed me to the brink of suicide. And when I hit that low moment, obviously I realized something needed to change. So that's what led me to years of research in neuroscience, psychology, spirituality, and ultimately to this concept of Fearvana that really is now immersing my work, and everything I'm doing is to help people live happier and more meaningful lives by embracing their struggles. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, you have a truly amazing story. I just love, hearing about it. And I wonder what has helped drive, I guess, this passion that you have, because I know people that have had struggles like you've had, but they've not been as successful. What drives you?
What I always say, and I think that the single most important skill that I believe, not just I believe, I've even learned this through research as well, to succeed at anything is the ability to embrace suffering. I just did a talk. I'm actually in India as we speak. I just did a talk a few days ago, and after the talk, this woman came up to me, and she had been horribly abused in her marriage, and it's gone through a lot of struggles. And after she was telling me about all these books she's read, and she was like, it seems like I shouldn't. You're saying that it should not just about being positive all the time, and there's a lot of this personal development world is like we should just be positive and be happy, and that's exactly what I'm not about. Like, it's not just about being positive, it's actually about embracing the negative. And what's allowed me to make these transformations, and again, I've been fairly blessed in creating sustainable behavior change in many areas of my life, is by allowing myself to be okay with my demons, to be okay with the fear, be okay with the struggle in every way, and not judging it, not labeling it, not beating myself up for feeling it, and then I'll channeling it to something meaningful. Because while embracing suffering is important, the second part of that is finding what I call a worthy struggle. So everybody has their worthy struggle, right? It could be raising a child, building a business, running a marathon, playing chess, whatever it may be. And when you find that worthy struggle and you walk that path, that's the most beautiful thing you can do. And that's why it's so important, again, to learn how to smile in the face of suffering, because as you embark upon any worthy challenge, it will be hard. But if you learn to smile in the face of struggle, in the face of suffering, you'll be able to overcome any obstacle standing between you where you are now and where you want to be. So that's really what's been invaluable. And I'm happy to get sort of more, detailed into the sort of the science of behavior change. But I'd say like those 2 concepts have been sort of the fundamentals in allowing me to get to where I'm at today.
Yeah, and in my practice as a mental health counselor, marriage and family therapist, one of the mindsets that I adopt personally in my practice is that of mindfulness. And I love just, how you're encouraging people to embrace whatever that they have going on, whether it's fear, it's pain and suffering, and then use that to grow from. Where would you encourage someone to start in that process? Like you mentioned, the lady had been in an abusive marriage. Where would be the first place they would start?
So I would say, like, when we're looking at this, the first place, and this is kind of the first section of my book as well on Fearvana, is recognizing that we don't control what first shows up in our brain. So why I say this is what happens is whenever, like, I worked with this kid, for example, who was diagnosed with depression by this therapist, and then what happened was that she started to believe that's who she is, that I have, not just that my brain goes to a state of depression from time to time, but that I am a person with depression. So every time she felt sad, it's like that's now a part of her self-identity.
Yeah.
So initially it's about letting go of that sense of whatever the problem is, whatever the suffering is, and attaching that to your self-identity. So I'll give you another example. When I came back from Iraq, as I mentioned, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And you always hear me say that I was diagnosed with it, not that I have it, because it's two distinct things. And, you know, what I learned was, like, again, an example, when I came back, I was very jumpy with loud noises. And now that was a symptom that the veteran affairs therapist said, okay, that means you have post-traumatic stress disorder. But what I learned through my research was that the symptoms of post-traumatic stress are not indicative of a disorder. Just because I'm jumpy when there's loud noises doesn't mean it's a disorder. That's like a very normal human response to war, because my brain learned to associate loud noises with death, right? Like, so inevitably it became more vigilant, hypervigilant. It built that connection in my amygdala, which is the quote unquote fear center of the brain where our implicit memories are stored. And so separating myself from that association, recognizing that we don't control what first shows up in our brain. So if I'm standing on the edge of a cliff and I feel fear, it's normal to feel that fear. But often what most of us, in fact almost all of us, do is judge our emotions. We label some emotions as bad, some emotions as good, and then we beat ourselves up for feeling it, or we associate it with our self-identity that, okay, now I'm a person with PTSD, I have a disorder, there's something wrong with me. Letting go of that judgment is kind of step one, and then you can choose what you do with it. You know, Viktor Frankl, who is a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust in Auschwitz, have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
No, I haven't.
Amazing book. So he wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning, after he came out of the Holocaust, and in it he says, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I think that's the most powerful quote that I've ever heard, and really kind of sums up what it takes to be successful and even happy, because there's that stimulus, and not just an external stimulus, but our internal subconscious response to the world. Like, okay, I feel fear in X scenario, right? There's that stimulus. But between the stimulus and our conscious response to it, there's that space. And what we do in that space is our destiny. And that space, we master it, exactly what you're saying, mindfulness.
Yeah.
You know, getting aware that there is a space. So, okay, I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling stress. What am I going to do with it? Instead of reacting from it, responding to it. And that's really what life is all about, is about mastering that space between the stimulus and the response.
I think that is so powerful. And I definitely will check out the book you mentioned, Man's Search for Meaning.
Amazing book,
yes, yeah. Yes. And tell us a little more about your book, Fearvana. And I think it's such a powerful tool that can help so many people. Tell us about it.
Sure. So as I said, it led me to this concept after I really hit that low point in my life and took on this years of research in neuroscience and all of that. And the idea is it's fear and nirvana, right? These two seemingly contradictory ideals. I mean, or ideas, not ideals, although I believe fear is an ideal, but fear and then nirvana, right, which is sort of the epitome of bliss and enlightenment itself, that people believe are contradictory, but I have come to learn is very much complementary. Not just through my research, but even in my own life experience. The best things I've ever done have terrified me, from skiing across the polar ice cap to joining the Marines, even when 2 doctors told me to kill me, to going to war. All of these things were terrifying. I mean, even writing a book on fear was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Because the whole time I'm like wondering, is it going to be any good? Are people going to judge it? All that kind of stuff. But fear was a good thing because it allowed me to write a better book. You know, it helped me study, how do I write a good book? I mean, I must have trashed over 100,000 words worth of work to get to the end result. But now it's something I'm truly proud of. It's making an impact. Just the other day, I had somebody write me saying this is like my new Bible, you know, and it's doing that only because I was afraid of writing the book in the first place. Otherwise, I wouldn't have cared. So Fearvana is this concept that fear is the path to growth. Fear is the path to enlightenment itself. And the definition, sort of the technical definition of the way I like to give it, is that Fearvana is the bliss that results from engaging our fears to pursue our own worthy struggle. And we all have that own worthy struggle. So it's about engaging the fear that will come and they inevitably show up on the path to walking that struggle. And through that, we find joy, we find bliss, we find growth, we find everything that we're looking for in life. And plenty of research on happiness has shown the same thing.
That's amazing. And what I really just appreciate is your attention to words and their meaning. And in my practice, those are things that I encourage my clients to look at. You know, what does this word mean? What does it mean to you? And the fact that you did not allow a diagnosis to define you, that is so powerful. Too many of the clients I work with struggle in that area. And I'm interested in knowing what is your goal? What is it that you're working towards ultimately in your life?
So now that the book is launched, what we're really doing is creating a whole ecosystem under this concept of Fearvana, like to give people ultimately the means to embrace their struggle and live happier and more meaningful lives. So, for example, we're going to be creating a Fearvana fitness. We've already started a nonprofit called the Fearvana Foundation. We're going to be building out a Fearvana Academy, a Fearvana Festivals, Fearvana Adventures, Fearvana Travel. So basically, this whole ecosystem in a bunch of different verticals under the umbrella category of helping people enhance their well-being and living a more meaningful and fulfilled life. Essentially, like kind of what Sir Richard Branson is to Virgin, I want to be to Fearvana.
Yeah.
But unlike Virgin, which has sort of 200 different verticals, really focusing it on a select few and building those out in a way that will give people the tools, the knowledge, the resources, the community, everything they need to ultimately, live a happier life and successful, however they choose to define success.
Yeah, and I know you talk about even experiencing fear and writing a book about fear. Would you mind sharing with us, I guess, something that was challenging for you throughout this journey and how you overcame that?
Sure. I, for example, I don't think I'm a great writer. It's not inherently like I love public speaking. It comes very well to me. I love talking, as you can probably tell. I love all that. But writing was very hard for me. You put me on a mountain in an extreme environment, I thrive. But sitting on a computer staring at a screen was very challenging for me. It wasn't necessarily within my comfort zone. I mean, I would often avoid writing by going running a marathon. That was my way to procrastinate. It was like, I'm just going to go running all day, And sometimes it surprised people. Wait, it's easier for you to go running all day than it is to sit and stare at a computer screen. I'm like, on a comfortable couch, and I'm like, absolutely. So, but recognizing, okay, this is challenging for me, but also understanding that this is now the worthy struggle I've chosen for myself, because the book has so much power, right? Is this thing? I mean, the book has reached over 35 countries, and it's something that extends beyond you. It's like your message to the world. I mean, when I dead and gone, this book will live. It's like essentially eternal, and that to me was of value. And again, we're also giving away all the proceeds of the book to charity, so it's a way to raise funds. It's a way to get the message out to more people, and of course, on a personal level, it's a way to grow my own business and my brand as well. Having a book and being an author and all that kind of thing. So it kind of combining all of that, recognizing this is my worthy struggle, and then embracing the forces of pain and pleasure. So understanding that, okay, here's what all the pleasure elements are if this book is out there, and also looking at it from a point of view as what are the consequences if I don't put this out there. So one thing that's very valuable is actually staying present to my own death. Like, what if I die tomorrow, never having shared this message with the world, And it's not just about living every day like it's your last, like that sort of cliche, because the thing is, if we're living every day like it's our last, there's no way in hell I would sit and stare at a computer screen for 8 hours a day if that was my last day, right? That's not what I would do. But so it's not in that cliche sense. It's about actually staying present to the fact that, look, I'm going to be dead soon. I don't know when that day is. Probably not tomorrow, but it's going to come soon. Yeah. And I want to live every moment, and I want to do something meaningful with this message. And sometimes that does mean grinding out certain things that not necessarily are enjoyable. I had nights where I'd stare at a computer screen and not a lot would come out, and other nights, I would write thousands of words and I'd be really in flow. So recognizing those two forces and then building systems, working in very specific chunks, essentially isolating myself from the world, deciding I'm not going to do anything but write, setting a time in my calendar. I would set 1 hour to 1 hour, 10-minute chunks of writing, and then take a 10-minute structured break. So, building systems around it to ensure that I'm getting it done. But definitely the motivation had to be there. So it's a kind of a combination of motivation and discipline, and building those systems to ensure you actually just sit there and do it. And coming back to my main point is the willingness to suffer. Some days you're sitting in a computer screen and not a lot's coming out, but you gotta ride that out, You gotta ride that out.
Yeah. And you've been featured on CNN, Forbes, Inc. Magazine, Fast Company, and you've created an amazing brand and you've become a thought leader. And I'm interested in knowing what is your philosophy of leadership?
Oh, great question. I think ultimately leadership is about, creating other leaders, right? It's about leading people to achieve a mission, and that mission is, so let's say you're in war, for example. I was a non-commissioned officer, so I was in charge of people, and there was missions to follow. And I think leadership is about yes, you have to take care of yourself, but it's about putting your troops in front of yourself to accomplish your desired mission, and creating all the other leaders, not just creating followers. So I think that's one of the core elements of leadership. And how do you do that? It's important to learn the psychology of influence, so you can connect with people people, you can relate to them, you can influence them, and not just for your own self, but part of it is also the ability to effectively articulate a compelling vision. So you got to know what that vision is. You got to be able to effectively articulate it, and then you got to rally people on board to that vision. So, ultimately leadership is saying we're going to build a team to accomplish a certain mission, whatever that mission is, and being able to rally the troops, so to speak, keep them driven, keep them motivated. I mean, one of my favorite books on leadership is Endurance, where Sir Ernest Shackleton led a whole team, and all of them survived despite being isolated in the South Pole for I think over 2 years. This was way back when, and I mean, it's one of the most amazing books on leadership and taught me a lot as well. Is okay, how do you rally people through struggle, through adversity, keep them driven, keep them focused on the mission at hand, and ultimately lead themselves and lead others, and in hostile environments, because for me it was hostile environments in warfare. Yeah. And now as I'm building out my own brand, is leading others by articulating this vision, rallying people on board, finding your troops, so to speak, who believe in the vision enough, and keeping them driven in it through the various sort of strategies and motivations, some of which I mentioned about the pain pleasure dynamic, and ultimately enrolling them in the vision, so having them see that this is something they care about, not just something that you're doing. And that's where you come into the psychology of influence, understanding what drives people. Then when you understand what drives them, you tap into their needs, and not just saying, hey, this is for me, right? Like this is your need kind of thing. And not to trick people. Of course, leadership and psychology of influence can be used to manipulate people. Yeah. But obviously that's not the the vision here. It's really to support people and enroll them in a vision to ultimately support our greater human family.
And then that's so interesting, and it's something that I'm very passionate about as I continue to explore and research on leadership, but also just in the mental health therapy world.
Yeah,
I'm interested in knowing how do you handle setbacks? What do you tell yourself when you have experienced something that someone else may perceive as a setback?
It definitely happens. I get rejections from media outlets when I pitch them. I get rejections from book agents, all that kind of stuff. And it's hard. I think part of it is not just sidestepping it, I think sometimes people say, oh, be positive, it's okay and all that. It's not. It's okay to feel low about it. Feel it, Yeah. But the thing is, you don't want to wallow in it for too long. And that literally feeling low could mean half an hour, 20 minutes. As you evolve and as you keep doing it, that time frame will get shorter. But saying, oh man, that sucks, Cool. Okay, let me move on. And part of that is recognizing that I'm only getting rejections if I'm doing something, right? If I'm not out there, if I'm sitting on a couch, there is no setbacks because I'm not doing anything. So, accepting that setbacks are a sign that I'm actually putting myself out there. So, okay, if I'm pitching 5 media outlets and I get 5 no's, hey, at least I'm putting myself out there, because if I pitch 100, I'll get 1. And as you mentioned, I've been fairly successful in getting my name out there. But it's not like I got yeses for every time I pitched or every time I was out there. That was a result of grinding, putting myself out there, and willing to say, okay, this 1 no will or this 10 no's will eventually lead to a yes. So I think part of it is being okay with the low, again, not just being positive all the time. Okay, I'm low, it sucks, I got rejected, cool. What's next, right? Yeah. And then sort of saying to myself that rejection is an inevitable part of the process, failure, however you define it, all that kind of stuff. You can get into semantics. Some people will say, oh, it's not a failure, it's just a path to growth. So whatever you want to call it, yes, setbacks happen, and how do we stay driven, right? That's where we get to staying clear on the vision, staying clear on that reward, on the pain dynamic, really being present to that at all times is a big part of it as well. So, okay, I gotta stay present to this. It sucks. Maybe you get 20 rejections in a row and then it really hits you, and you're like, oh, that's really rough. But staying present to okay, you know what? Here's the vision. Here's what I want to create. Here's why I want to create it. Being present to that reward and being present to the consequences. Okay, if I don't put myself out there that 21st time and I just quit, here's the consequences of that. Being present to both those forces.
Yes.
And that's really valuable in staying at it, staying in the grind.
And you shared with us your success of overcoming, drug addiction and alcoholism. And that's something that I work with people on. And sometimes not everyone is able to come out of that. And I'm interested in knowing how can your philosophy, how can even your book, Fearvana, how can that help families that are struggling in these areas?
Yeah, obviously it's not easy I mean, as I said, I've lost friends to drug addiction, lost friends to alcohol addiction, and it definitely isn't easy. I didn't go to rehab myself. It was self-driven, my own getting out of it both times with drugs and with alcohol. And I've actually heard the success rates, as I went through this whole journey and understanding it myself, the success rates from what I understand in rehab is pretty low, like in the single digits percentage, even with like AA and stuff like that. It's unfortunately much lower than you might think. So what are the elements though? Like looking at what are the elements of addiction, like I think having a support structure, having community, having people you love be on board is really part of it. Recognizing that that's not who you are, coming back to the concept of that myth of free will. Because the big thing is that even when I myself struggle with this, is like, okay, I am an alcoholic, right? Like, and that's why I don't like that element of AA saying I'm an alcoholic. Like, why do you say that every time? Like, don't make that who you are. That's not who you are.
Yeah.
Your brain went through a phase, it built a pattern in you, a pattern that eventually becomes beyond your control. Like, because again, we don't control what first shows up in our brain. So for example, when I first struggled with it, when I first started getting out, I noticed sometimes these triggers would show up like, okay, if I do X, if I feel stressed, like, okay, I would go to movies, and movies would often mean drinking for me, like, because of many of the dine-in theaters, they had beer. So I noticed that trigger would show up, right? Like, I go in, now I'm feeling like a trigger gets activated just looking at the habit loop of cue, routine, reward, right? So noticing the trigger, then creating that space between stimulus and response, that starts practicing through self-awareness and mindfulness. But just recognizing and separating yourself from that identity that I am this that I'm an addict. I'm not an alcoholic. Yes, my brain went through a pattern. Yes, I struggle with it from time to time. But there's no way in hell I'm going to choose to define myself by that label, right? Like I'm going to create a new one. So separating yourself from this identity, the self-identity of what this issue, and then finding a worthy struggle. Like a big element of it is you cannot just leave a void. Like when you come out of addiction, that void has to be filled with something. Yeah. And often, like both my friends who died from drug addiction, that was a big problem. One of them went to rehab multiple times, came out, had no way to fill that void, and eventually went back to it, OD'd, and died. So filling that void is a big one. Like you have to fill that void. I think exercise is essential. I think any person, anytime it's come to me for any kind of growth, like whatever it may be, overcoming addiction, overcoming PTSD, overcoming struggles, like anything, exercise is an absolute must-have. Like it's a way to replace dopamine in the brain. It gives you that positive high, and plenty of neuroscience, psychology research has shown that. One neuroscientist calls it "quote unquote" miracle growth for the brain, because it literally is, miracle growth for the brain. It enhances your synapses, your neural connections. It allows you to be better and physically, mentally, spiritually. So exercise is a must-have. And then I think an element of faith and spirituality is really valuable as well. Whatever that may look like for you, everybody's got their own way. So tapping into that in whatever way it looks like for you is really, really useful as well. And it's funny you mention it, because as I mentioned, I'm in India right now, and I'm about to start working on a project to help combat the drug problem in northern India, in this Punjab region, which actually is very, very high. And I'm going to be doing some projects out there because of my background, to help combat that and help support some of the people struggling with addiction up there. So really starting to understand this a lot better, not just from a perspective of, because it's one thing to kind of get over it myself, it's another to say, okay, now how do I replicate this in others, right? So now starting to approach it more from that perspective.
And Akshay, I love your passion and the mission that you've adopted for yourself. I'm curious, where does that come from? I know you've had personal experiences, but what drives you to continue to reach out and, one person at a time, try to make the world a better place? What drives that?
Yeah, part of it is definitely, there's obviously a huge reward when you hear it's making an impact. Like when I get emails, when somebody messages me saying this is like my new Bible, and I've been struggling with fear for my whole life. Just doing this talk the other day, I mentioned this woman who was abused. She said you should do a Fearvana for women. I met another woman whose child was disabled. She said you should do a Fearvana for disabled people. So
Wow.
It's resonating with so many communities that they want me to create something special to that community. Like something like I bring the concepts and methodologies down to that community, and that means so much to me, right? Like, so personally, it's just incredibly rewarding. I think we all have a great human need for contribution, for service to our human family. So when you get that, it drives you, it keeps you in action. And of course, it's not always easy. Like some days you hate it, the grinds. But when I look at what the alternative is, it's almost like sometimes you have no choice. Like, what is the alternative? I sit on a couch, sit on my ass doing nothing, right?
Yes.
Like, no, that's never an alternative. So, and we all need our days off, and sometimes you just need to I don't know what that looks like. Everybody's got their own path, but I just got back from a movie with my parents, right? Like, I wasn't working on that, and and cool. Like, I had a day off to chill with my parents. I got back, I got right into work. Like, it's 11:25 if you're in India for me right now. After I finish this, I'm gonna finish speaking with you. There's a few more things I've got on the list, and then gonna go to bed. So, but I took that time off, and we all get to decide what that looks like for us. But the point is that, like, you get to a point where it's almost like no other choice, because you start to also enjoy the grind. Like, I love what I do. Not always. There's moments where you just got to do little tedious things because you got to do it. But I love speaking. Like, right now, I love public speaking. I love speaking on these interviews, like speaking with you right now and doing all of this. I really enjoy it. I love, you can hear the passion, the energy. Right? And I enjoy it because I enjoy it. And so, like, you start to enjoy what you do, and then when it makes an impact, like, that just seals the deal. It becomes almost like a responsibility. Like, now it's no longer just, a thing for me to do. Like, it's like a responsibility that I have to. And this is coming back, actually, just to kind of tie into something we talked about earlier about not defining ourselves by our emotions and the PTSD label, and really realizing that every emotion can be useful. So, for example, when I got back from Iraq, I struggled with survivor's guilt. I lost a friend in the war. And for a long time, that tore me up. It drove me to alcohol. It drove me to very, very dark places. But today, that guilt is a huge ally of mine. I have a picture of my friend. In fact, I'm pulling it out right now. I have this little laminated picture of my friend and me, and it says, "This should have been you. Earn this life." And, like, recognizing that now, I truly believe it should have been me that died out there instead of my friend. And since I truly believe that, let me say that, okay, let me not waste this. I've been gifted this life now. It's to honor this life that I've been gifted, to honor my friend's death, and to say it's a responsibility now for me to keep serving people. And like I said, we all get caught up in the grind from time to time. I do too. I'm human, and that sometimes fades. But I like to keep coming back to that motivation, because it reminds me that it's not about me. It's not about me and my stuff. It's about this thing that I can do, and it's touching lives, and it's about making that impact. So I have a burden of responsibility that's not just a burden; it's also a gift.
Yes. Well, Akshay, I just appreciate you sharing with us your passion, and yes, I can definitely hear it and feel it in your voice. That's so encouraging. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we close?
One thing is, I'm always accessible. Like, I definitely intend to be one of those authors that's responds to my own email, to anything I can do to support, especially if somebody's struggling with anything, but of course the addiction, PTSD, any of that stuff. I've been through it, so I know how hard it can be. Happy to help in any way I can, and just to kind of make it actionable is just literally coming back. The single most important skill to develop for you, yourself, anybody else, is really to get comfortable with struggle. Like, ignore a lot of that, because I see that the damage it does when people are just like, I should be positive all the time. Like, even this woman who came up to me and said, she literally asked me, so she was like, it sounds like you're saying not to be positive all the time. And I asked her, I was like, do you still have negative thoughts? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, of course you do. We all do. So the point is not fight them, not resist them, but be with them, be okay with them, embrace them. And when you do that, when you say, okay, I'm okay with this fact that it happens, I'm not going to say, oh, I got to be positive and smile all the time, and say, okay, every emotion is useful. Then you get to do something with it. So really, like, being okay, embracing the struggle, and channeling it to something meaningful. And that'll help you guide to a happier and successful life.
Awesome. And I know your book, Fearvana, is available on Amazon. And if someone wanted to reach out to you or get more information, where would they need to go?
Right now, you can find me on Fearvana.com, or reach out to me at Akshay@Fearvana.com, and I'm happy to serve in any way I can.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show, Alvin.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, as well as providing a rating and review. Every week, I will interview a different leader and invite them to share with us their views and perspective on the relationship between leadership and family. Be sure to visit my website. It's www.alvinbonds2nd.com. That's ALVINBONDSII.com. Have a great day.
Why do we do the things we do? What drives us? We all want to be happy, but what does that mean? I found the answer after serving in Iraq with the U.S. Marines, overcoming PTSD, and winning a war against alcohol that pushed me to the brink of suicide. years of research in neuroscience, psychology, and spirituality, I discovered the secret of Fearvana. Success and happiness are not waiting for you out there somewhere. They are waiting for you in the here and now, in the pursuit of a meaningful challenge worthy of who you are and who you want to be. The journey won't be easy. You will struggle. You will confront your demons, but that's not a bad thing. The greater your demons, the greater the divinity required to defeat them. The path to enlightenment is not to escape your fears, but embrace them. For if you don't seek out that worthy struggle, struggle will find you anyway, as it once found me. Rising into my fears, I slowly climbed out of that abyss. I found Fearvana while mountaineering in the Himalayas, skiing across a polar ice cap, and even in the terrifying silence of pure stillness. So which path do you choose? I invite you to never stop chasing fear, or you will spend your whole life running from it. If you're ready to take on that battle between the part of you that wants to quit and the part that wants to fight, you will enter the doorway to your next awakening. In that moment, you will experience the bliss of Fearvana.